Hi, everybody, and welcome to another one of my live streams where I interview talented IT professionals who got endorsed for the UK Global Talent Visa. For those who are new here, welcome. Please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube if you're watching this on YouTube or wherever you're watching this. My name is Nadia. I'm a UK Global Talent Visa recipient and visa coach, which means that I help talented IT professionals like you get endorsed for this visa. I'm also a visa recipient, which means that I got endorsed for this visa as a software engineer last year. And ever since, I've been talking about this visa, sharing information and knowledge, all in the hopes of inspiring and enabling as many people as possible to use this amazing opportunity and get your hands on the best UK visa. And I do believe that this is the best visa possible. So today we have an exciting guest. We have somebody from the world of product. I know that a lot of people have been requesting me interviews with product leaders in the past. So I'm excited to introduce our guest today. Welcome, Deji. Hi.
Hi, Nadia. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for spending the time with us. I know you had a busy day, a lot of meetings, so thanks so much for hopping over to this call.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's start with some intros. Basically, usually people tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, what you do for a living, kind of in more detail what your professional background is, because this will help others who are listening to this understand whether your experience is applicable to them and what they can learn from it.
All right, great, Nadia. Thank you so much. My name is Deji Fash, and what I do, I build products for a living. I have about 12 years experience building products. But what I'm really passionate about doing is building products that solves real life problems for millions of individuals worldwide rather. And I've been privileged to do this in multiple verticals, multiple countries. I built products in consulting, built products in fintech, build products in e-commerce, build products in retail, build products for the government, right? And I've done this in Nigeria, Kenya, United Kingdom, and a couple of other countries. And then, I mean, for me, that's what I'm really passionate about. Well, I'm a married man. I have a wife. I have a kid, a beautiful daughter. And yes, I'm a recipient of the Global Talent Visa also.
Amazing. Thanks for the intro. So you mentioned that you have experience building products across different countries. Maybe you can share some of your biggest takeaways from building products across various cultures and countries. What comes to mind? What are the biggest differences that you have seen in building products and being a product manager in the UK and, for instance, in Africa?
I mean, so one thing that you need to focus on, right, as a product manager or product leader is the customer, the user. There's something called product myopia, which from is one of the best discoveries that I've made when it comes to building products. And basically, it is a product manager or a product team building products without necessarily engaging the users to understand the user preferences. So what I always advise is that if you're building products, always engage the users and leverage the data that you get from engaging these users, and then infuse it into the building of the products. The reason is because across geographical locations, across cultures, user behaviors are always different, user preferences are always different and changing. So for instance, the average Nigerian customer is quite price sensitive, but when you juxtapose this against a similar customer in the UK or Europe, that person is not so as price sensitive as the Nigerian person is. You understand? So the cultures always kind of affect how users interact with your product, how they use your product. I mean, for instance, in Nigeria and some parts of Africa, when building products, you kind of have to factor in the mobile or internet penetration. You kind of have to factor in the power and the electricity condition because there are still parts Nigeria or Africa that does not necessarily have 24/7 electricity. So all of these nuances, right, has to go into the kind of product you build and ensure that you're building it for the right market, ensuring that the market is ready for the products you're actually building. So for me, these are some of the differences that I've seen across geographical locations and across different cultures.
Very interesting. Did you find it a big change for you to switch from building products for the for different African countries towards building them for the UK audience? And maybe you can tell us a little bit about how long ago did you move to the UK and started building products here?
I mean, so I'm actually still going through the process, interestingly, right? But I mean, what I can say is that the principles are the same. For instance, when it comes to building product, the processes are the same. When it comes to running agile or scrum teams, the activities, the team members, the compositions are kind of the same, right? But I'm saying that if you have a great understanding of these principles and frameworks as a product manager or a product leader, it helps because you have the base. But that's one part. You also have to ensure that you have the requisite experience to be able to put these things to use and yeah, put it to use so that it can actually stick, right? Because that's what really makes you a great product manager and kind of differentiates you from every other person. Now, taking this knowledge which you have, which has also stuck to you, taking it into the different markets, of course, you then start to find the different nuances of the different markets come to play, right? For instance, the criteria which are accepted in terms of regulation in UK is kind of different from Nigeria, right? The behavior, like I spoke earlier, the behavioral considerations of the customer in Nigeria is different from the UK or the US, that kind of thing. So for me, the switch has been quite interesting, to be very honest. I'm kind of still going through the process. You find out, like I said, that the average European customer or the average customer in UK is not as price sensitive. The average customer in London, for instance, doesn't have issues with electricity or has no issues with mobile or internet penetration. So all of that, right, has kind of made me to kind of broaden my horizon or knowledge when it comes to building products for other markets. But my major advice would be always build for the users, always seek to understand the users first of all. As long as you're able to engage the users, as long as you're able to get data from the users and then use that data to infuse your development process or your customer journey, you would always be on the right path. As long as you're building for the users, you would always be on the right path. So for me, irrespective of the market, irrespective of the customer, I always find a way to engage the customers, get what is called the voice of the customer. There's something which we product managers, of course, call the voice of the customer. Get the voice of the customer and then build based on what the voice of the customer is saying. So whatever location you find yourself, the principles are the same thing. You just need to apply it and you'll be fine.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I do find it that some people who are thinking about immigrating to another country and who aren't software engineers, they worry a little bit about how they will adjust their profession to a new culture, whether this will be a difficult change or not. And it's interesting that you say that the general principles stay the same, but you have to learn the specifics of the market and you always have to build for the users and talk to the users. So, which is all very interesting. And I'm also personally interested in cultural differences and communication differences between how people work with each other and talk to each other, which I'm sure again are very different from between Nigeria and the UK. So that's all interesting to unpack, and maybe we can go into that later on as well if we have time. So I wanted to circle back and kind of discuss whether what was your motivation for deciding to pursue this visa and move into the UK, because you have clearly had quite a distinguished career already as a product manager.
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, for me, I kind of built products for the Nigerian market and for the African markets, but I kind of needed to start to build products for the global markets. And that was my major motivation. I wanted to go from playing on the African scene to playing on the global scene. I wanted to find myself in a scenario where I wasn't only building for the Nigerian or African markets, but I was building global products for the global markets. And for me, I mean, I got that inspiration, and then I kind of started to think, what is the best way to achieve this? I mean, yes, there is always the option of getting a remote job, but sometimes it's better to actually find yourself in these cultures because as a product person, the best way you can really get the best, right, out of the products you're building for a particular geographical location or a particular set of customer is by being there with them and engaging with these customers directly. And then I kind of thought for me to be able to build global products for a global customer base, I kind of need to move around a lot more. And then the technician option, of course, came up, right? And I mean, I took the opportunity and I'm here today. But my major motivation was to go from building products for the Nigerian market and the African market to building products, digital products for the global markets.
Yeah, congrats on getting endorsed for the visa. I sometimes forget to congratulate my guests on this, but it's such a big achievement. So really, good
Yeah,
job doing that. And I'm always happy to interview people from the business side of things because there is still a lack of information for people who apply for the business route, unlike
yeah,
for the technical route, where I think there is quite a lot of information already online. I've interviewed myself. I've interviewed many software engineers. So I'm always
yeah.
curious to hear more of a business perspective on this, about structuring your case and the documents and all of that. So can you tell me a little bit about your process of choosing the UK? Were you initially set on moving to the UK, or did you first consider any other countries as relocation options?
I mean, to be very honest, I wasn't really keen on moving to the UK. For me, I had the goal. The goal was clear. I wanted to build products for a much more global market, and of course, there were a couple of options. There was the US, there was Canada, there was UK, there were other countries, right? And to be very honest, I kind of started exploring different options. But then, stumbling on the global talent route. I mean, it kind of really gave me what I needed because number one, I needed some sort of freedom and mobility to move around. Number two, I wanted to find myself in a scenario where I could decide to work or start a business, right, and run it effectively, right. And I also wanted a strong visa, kind of, right. I mean, I didn't want like a visa which was going to come with a lot of restrictions. And the global talent option kind of met all of those criteria, and I decided to go for it.
Was this a quick decision, just learning about it and just
Oh
going
no,
for it, or?
oh no, 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 no! It wasn't a quick decision, actually. No, it actually took me maybe between 2 to 3 months to decide. But the key thing was once I decided, like I took action immediately. And the reason is
Mm,
because sometimes you decide on things and then you start to kind of procrastinate. But I was very clear on the vision. I was very passionate about it, and immediately I was able to reach a decision that, you know what, I think this is the best option for you, DG, and your family, right? And of course, he also allowed my family to come around with me and also get the same access that the visa gave. So, I mean, it was just the best thing. So immediately I was able to decide that this was all I wanted. I kind of just took action and I went for it immediately.
It's funny to me that you say that it took you 2 or 3 months and that you think that it's not quick. It's actually quick because you sometimes meet people who are thinking about immigrating somewhere for years and they are always, postponing it and always finding reasons not to do that. So yeah, I think that
Yeah.
it's still very quick.
I mean, to be very honest, the truth is that, I mean, yeah, Nadia, what's the worst that could happen, right? What is the worst that could happen? You
Yeah.
try it and you probably don't get it, right? And you can try again later. But what is even worse is if you don't take an action, right? If years go by and you don't even try it out, I think it's a worse feeling than you maybe trying it out and you don't get it. So my encouragement for anybody listening today is if you feel this is an option for you, I think you should just take the action immediately. Just commit yourself and just start it, right? There is no, the worst that could happen is that you wouldn't get it, to be very honest. Nothing worse than that can happen. But also, you have a great chance to actually get this great opportunity. So I would advise anybody to just take the action immediately.
Yeah, I agree. And also, if once you get the visa, sometimes people worry, like, what if I come to the UK and things don't work out? What if I don't like it, or I don't get a good job or something? Again, you can try it, and then you can always come back. I mean, in most cases, sometimes people can't go back for various reasons, but in most cases, you can come back and you can start maybe in a different country, or your home country, or something else. Like you don't like nothing bad will happen to you most likely. So I do hope that listening to the live streams and the stories like yours, people will start getting rid of this fear a little bit, because
Yeah.
I think it really helps to hear stories of other people and also to see people who have a similar background. And either professional or cultural, and maybe this helps because if you see people who are like you doing something, then maybe you get more inspired to take action and just try.
Yeah.
So when you decided to go for the visa, what was the process like? What research did you do? How long it took you to kind of go from deciding to submitting, and just the general, like what it looked like for you, whether you did it on your own, whether you used any help. So yeah, the mechanics of it basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole process kind of took me about maybe 6 weeks, putting my case together, putting my documents together, and just really getting everything ready. So it took me about 6 weeks thereabouts. And I mean, I kind of did most of it myself. Of course, I had a bit of help from friends, from family, people helping me with tips, advice, and all those types of things. But I mean, the instructions were very clear from Global Talent, and that was very, very helpful. So I kind of just followed that and just put my application together. Altogether, it took me about 6 weeks, to be very honest. And I mean, I made sure I got strong references, very, very important, right? And of course, putting my case together, I was very, very detailed about it and structured in the process. So that helped also.
Yeah, definitely. So it was quite quick. Again, sometimes it takes months. Sometimes people take, I don't know, 6 months to a year to collect. But I do think that there are a lot of things that can go wrong basically within this process outside of just procrastinating on this. So about your particular case, so you're applying as a product manager, right? So maybe you can talk to us about the criteria that you chose for the optional criteria, and yeah, just basically anything you can share about the documents that you used to prove your case, how you chose the criteria, how did you decide which ones are the strongest for you?
So I mean, there was the global promise option, there was global talent option. The global promise option basically, I mean, was people who were kind of starting off in their tech career, right? And I mean, for me, I had a lot of experience. So the global promise wasn't like an option for me. I just had to go for the global talent. So it was kind of a straightforward decision, to be very honest, going for the global talent option because of the years of experience I had, and also because I kind of had enough evidence to also put forward for the global talent option. So it was a very straightforward decision for me.
Yeah, this makes sense. And about the criteria, so there are 4 optional criteria, right, that you can choose when you apply. And I mean, there are 4 criteria to choose from, but you have to choose 2. When it comes to those optional criteria, which ones did you choose, and how did you make this decision?
So I mean, for me, I went for evidences that allowed me to show proof of innovation at companies where I was working on at that time, and also evidences that allowed me to show proof of significant contribution in digital-led organizations. So for me, those were the evidences or routes that I went for, and also I was able to show. I was able to get very strong references to actually support my application. So I got the right recommendation letters, and I was also able to get the right references to support my application. So these were references with people that I worked with in the past in digital-led organizations, companies where I had maybe consulted for as a product leader and built products for them, or maybe organizations where we had solved a very prevalent problem, for instance. So those were the evidences that I put for. Those were the routes that I went for, basically.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that you used some documents, some letters from clients you consult for. So I know that consulting is kind of a sensitive topic with technician, and if you read the guide, you will see that consulting experience isn't really applicable. But I also know that people a lot of the time use consulting experience, but frame it in a different way, and it works. Especially in the cases of innovations and things like that. So maybe you can share tips of how you frame this evidence for people who have experience like this working for clients rather than working within a specific company.
Yes. So in cases where you've consulted, so putting together the evidence, basically, what technician really, and this was from my study on my research, what technician really wanted to see was how your contribution had been able to cause like a great effect in the organization, how your contribution had been able to improve maybe their acquisition of customers, the conversion of customers, or the monetization of the customers in the organization. So you had to be very deliberate with the sort of evidences that you're providing. Evidences had to show how your contribution was able to move particular metrics or improve particular metrics that led to an improvement in the bottom line. You understand? So some of these evidences were maybe product pages showing the metrics of the performance of the product, right? Or maybe screenshots showing how you had contributed to maybe the raising of a seed round for an organization. That was part of some of the evidences that I also submitted, right? You would also have to put screenshots if you are also very integral to the actual core product development process or SDLC, software development lifecycle of those particular products. You had to also be able to put it out as an evidence. So the great thing about this is that if you've truly done the work, you would have the evidence. I mean, that's the way I always like to explain it. So those evidences have to be put forward in a structured way. Of course, in situations where you needed to provide maybe a large set of data, you could summarize it, but make sure that when summarizing, the essence of what you're trying to pass across is not missed. You understand? So screenshots were very, very helpful. And also for some of those screenshots, I always put like a bit of explanation, just providing a context as to what that particular screenshot contains, just to help whoever is reviewing to understand what that screenshot meant, of course. Also, for some of those organizations that I was consulting for, I was also privileged to be part of the shareholding of those complaints. So that was also very instrumental. Showing pages where it recorded that, oh, I had certain stock options or shares in those companies was also very, very helpful. So for scenarios where people are consulting for other organizations, that was how I was able to kind of structure my evidence in a scenario where I was kind of consulting, just showing my significant impact in those organizations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is actually very interesting. The fact that you also shared the documents about shares and options, I think is also interesting because this doesn't always happen with consultants, but it's interesting that it can. And basically, yeah, formulating it around the impact that you have done for the company and showing proof that you have done it. The thing that you mentioned about screenshots, I do agree with it because people sometimes worry and they ask me what kind of evidence should I submit, and I think the answer is that it depends on what you can find and what you can get your hands on, but also, as you said, if you have done the work and you can, then you should be able to prove it, because if you have the work, basically you will find the screenshots eventually or some other kind of proof. But it's very important that you mentioned the thing about screenshots. It's not enough just to have reference letters, and it's clearly stated in the guide, but people still make this mistake and people still apply with just letters. Letters are great, but they're not enough. So always try to find something else that you can use to prove the thing that you are trying to prove. So you mentioned that you had a lot of strong letters of recommendation and a lot of strong reference letters from people that you worked with. Maybe you can give us an idea of what kind of experts those were in terms of what kind of level they were at in the corporate letter, because again, this is a common question people ask all the time. Do those people have to be CEOs of companies? Do they have to be C-level people? What if I don't know anybody C-level? And in general, any tips about getting strong letters of recommendation? I think especially it would be interesting, like how do you get a letter of recommendation if you consolidate for somebody, or getting a letter from a client. I think this would be an interesting thing to talk about as well, in terms of just communicating your need and getting the document that you need.
Yes. Okay. So first of all, so the reason why your recommendation letters or reference letters have to be as strong as possible, especially for the global talent route, is because they kind of expect that you've been in the industry for a number of years, so you've kind of built a strong enough network to be able to get those letters. So this is where the importance of networking, right, kind of comes to the fore. But yes, in terms of those letters, so I'll speak about the recommendation letters, then the reference letters afterwards. So you're required to submit 3 recommendation letters. For me, one of the persons who wrote the first recommendation letter was a co-founder of one of the biggest fintechs in Africa. Right. So, and the reason why that kind of helps is because the stronger the profiles of the persons who write your recommendation letters, the more weight those recommendations kind of carry, the more chances you have. So it's always important to go for the strongest people in your network. So he wrote that letter for me, and that was great to have. So he was a co-founder, by the way. So that's answering your question as must the person be a CEO or a C-level person? Not necessarily. And I'll kind of explain. The second person, for me, this was very important because this was also someone in the product space. She's someone that I respect a lot, and she had also built products in Nigeria and Europe, and she is also a recipient of the Global Talent visa option. She is also currently the head of products for one of the biggest fintechs in Africa. Also, so that was very helpful. Seeing someone who is also a product person like me recommend me and say all those great things about me, that was very helpful. And then the third person was a group director in one of the financial firms here in Nigeria, a group director of an asset holding management company, which also plays a part in the fintech space also. So that was also great. There were three very, very strong profiles. One was a co-founder, one was a head of product, and one was is rather a director in their respective organizations. And then for the reference letters, so what I did basically was getting a letter from some of these organizations that I had worked with, right? Just basically speaking of how much value I was able to bring to those organizations, how I'd been able to add to those organizations, and all those types of things. And the first reference letter I got was also from one of these companies that I consulted for. The CEO of the company now, of course, wrote a reference, basically just recommending me for the visa. The second one was also one of the organizations that I'm actually part of, right? As a director, I sit on the board of the organization, and of course, I mean, because they have been impressed with the value I brought to the team over a number of years, they were also able to write a letter for me. And the last one was from my organization, right? Basically, just writing a letter from the head of the human resources of my organization, basically just writing a letter about my impact at the organization at that time. So those were the three reference letters. So I had three strong recommendation letters from top persons in the industry, and then I had three reference letters from organizations that I had worked for in the past, basically writing about my work. So combining those two, of course, made my application a lot stronger, gave it a lot of weight, right, and just really made it increase my chances, basically, of getting a visa.
Yeah, I think you had an excellent selection of experts in your application. Yeah. This is, again, something that you can actually get rejected for if you, I mean, probably you won't be rejected just for this thing, but if your case has letters coming from the same company, just one company where you worked, it doesn't create the strongest impression, honestly, because they would ask a question. You have spent a number of years in the industry, especially if you're going for talent, as you said, and it's just strange that you can only get letters from your only, just one company. And sometimes it happens, but I always encourage my clients and just people who watch this channel, if you can get access to experts who are outside of your place of employment, this is great. You don't have to get letters just from your jobs. You can get people who know your work in some other shape or form to vouch for you as well. So this is challenging, but it's very much worth trying to find some other experts who can recommend you, definitely. So you're right that probably this made your application even stronger than it would have been otherwise. I took a look at your LinkedIn profile while you were talking, and I did. Sorry. Sorry about that. So I did took a look at your LinkedIn application, and I saw that you have a lot of mentorship experience in product management, in startups, and things like that. So can you tell us a bit more about whether you used this experience in your application or not? And if so, how did you do it?
Oh, yes, definitely. In fact, they formed like a very, very great part of my evidences, to be very honest. I think that was even what probably got me the endorsement. Well, I mean, everything else, but this played a very, very great part. So thankfully, over time, I kind of developed a passion for two things. Number one is disseminating knowledge when it comes to product management, and number two is mentoring people. So basically disseminating knowledge through teaching. So I kind of facilitate a lot of product management courses for different institutions. And then I also spend some other time mentoring people directly. So I kind of done a lot of that before I even applied for the Global Talent visa, basically. So for me, when it was time to kind of apply, it was easy for me to kind of bring all of those evidences forward, all of the classes I had taught, all of the curriculum that I had created personally myself, all of the research work that had gone into that, all of the time that I had spent mentoring people. So I was able to kind of bring all of that into the evidence and then put it forward. So I mean, someone listening to me yesterday is probably like, "Oh, I haven't done this." I mean, but the great thing is, it doesn't have to be for a long time. You can as well actually start. There are a lot of mentorship platforms that you can sign up for. There is ADP List and there are others. So you can just check out, sign up, and just kind of try to pass along the knowledge that you've gotten to others who are kind of growing up and coming after us. I mean, it's always very, very helpful. So for me, yes, it really helped Nadia. Really, really helped me. And I'm grateful I kind of spent a lot of my time doing all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always great to give back to the community, and then it's cherry on the top if you can also use this for an application like this. And I was just about to ask you what kind of tips you would give to somebody who is thinking about starting to do this, and you just answered my question. So I think for ADP List, I think it's a great platform, and I do agree that it's worth mentioning there. But also, I do want to caution people a little bit that it might not be enough to just mentor on this one platform or a platform like this, because I think that when it comes to, especially if you are choosing the second optional criteria, the contributions outside of work, TechNation has become stricter with this criteria over the time that I've been coaching people, and I've been researching the stuff since early last year. So I've seen a gradual shift toward this criteria being much stricter. So I think the expectation right now is that you also have some volunteering or mentoring experience within a structured mentoring program with selection criteria for mentors. So bear this in mind and try to vary your mentoring experience and make sure that you have something within like a structured program rather than kind of a self-paced one. This is important. So can you tell us what else comes to mind when you think about your application? Is there anything else that you feel helped you make the application stronger, other than the mentoring experience? Anything else?
So I think something else that also helped me was I was also one of the evidences I was able to provide was a publication, right, that I wrote with a very popular newsletter called The Flip by Justin Norman. So over the years, I've been able to build a lot of product teams from scratch. So I had found myself in situations where about 3 times in the past where I came into product teams and I came into organizations rather. And when I came into those organizations, there was no form of product organization or product function existing. And then I had to kind of build the product function from scratch myself. So I had found myself in this situation about 2 or 3 times in my career, and I had kind of learned a lot and built some sort of framework that I always use to kind of build the product function from the start up, from the ground up. I mean, this involved, of course, recruiting the right resources, instituting the right frameworks, the right tools, standards, best practices, processes, and all those types of things. And I mean, I wrote this elaborate piece with The Flip just a couple of weeks before decided I was going to apply for technician. And when time came to apply, that was also very, very useful because I was able to put that forward as one of my evidences also. So I think that's something that really, really helped my application. Something else that really helped my application.
Definitely publications, especially in leading sector publications, media publications, they definitely help. You have quite a large following on LinkedIn, for instance. But do you, in general, have quite a big public profile that you could use in your application? Because this is, again, something that people worry about. What if like they don't have a big social media presence? So I usually try to ask people like, what kind of presence do they have online before they apply? And how helpful do you think it was for you?
I think, maybe when it comes to the types of maybe the volumes of recipients you have, maybe in trainings that you've done, or maybe situations where you've been like maybe keynote speaker, because those are some of the things that technician looks as evidence, right? When it comes to maybe pulling crowd for those types of events, I think it helps. For the major application, you not having a large following on LinkedIn, I honestly do not think it's a disadvantage, to be very honest. It's just about the quality of your application, the quality of your evidences, what you've done in the past, the work you've put in for the organizations you work, and how you're able to structure this. Maybe this is something I should also mention. So you having the experiences is one thing, but being able to structure it is something else, right? So it's always great to leverage the help of experts. I mean, like Nadia, yeah. So it's always great to leverage the help of experts to help you properly structure your application. Because what I think also helped me was the fact that yes, I had the evidences, quite all right. I had the experience, but if I didn't structure it properly, right? If I didn't position it in such a way that the reviewer could see how my impact was able to improve the organizations I had worked with, I might have not gotten the endorsement. So having the experience and the evidences is one thing. It's great. It's very important. But also being able to structure it is equally as important. So I think that's something now. That's an advice I would give to everybody at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that a lot of people get rejected not because their experience is not good enough, but because their evidence is not structured correctly. And since I sometimes get people who reach out to me after getting rejected, after applying on their own, and I do review a lot of applications like this, I do see that it's very easy to make mistakes that can potentially cost you an application, which I think is quite a shame. So it's always worth spending either time or money on making sure that your application is as perfect as you can make it to be. And I do think that people from the business side of things, product managers, and also I've seen that designers have got it figured out pretty well. Thinking about this whole thing as a user experience thing, as a product, basically, right? Your application is a product. And I think this kind of mental model will help you a lot, and you should not ignore the experience of the person who will be reading it, and you should have a lot of empathy for them, especially now because Technation has closed down, but they're still accepting applications, and we do know that they have accepted like a record number of applications back in March when they were closing down. So just imagine that the person reading your application won't have a lot of time to process everything that you have written. So you have to explain things to them very clearly. The first document that they will actually read is the personal statement. So I was going to ask you about it as well. How did you approach writing it? Any kind of tips that you can share on this document, which to me now seems one of the most important documents that you can have in your application, actually.
Yes, thank you, Nadia. Your personal statement is an opportunity to make a lasting impact on wherever the reviewer is. It's also your opportunity for a great first impression, to be very honest. So the tips that I can provide when it comes to writing your personal statement is, first of all, what I used was a star writing approach, right? So situation, task, what does the A stand for? The action, and then the R is the results. So the situation, the task, the action, the result, that kind of thing. So it kind of helped me to put my personal statement in a more structured approach. That's number one. Number two was that I kept it simple, right? Simple language, clear English, used tools to review it and ensure there were no typos, right? And just ensure that the whole writing was very professional. That's number two. Number three was that very quickly I was able to show the level of experience that I had and how coming into the UK digital technology economy was going to benefit the UK itself. So that was something I was able to do earlier on, right? And then number four was that I clearly stated my plans in the UK. And it just follows that progression because you need to make them see how much value you would bring into the economy, and then you need to let them see how you're going to bring that value. So explaining and letting them see my value, my wealth of experience, and what I was going to bring, and also explaining what I was going to be doing while I was in the UK. I think for me was what really just made my personal statement good, right? I was able to explain how I was going to bring a lot of value when it comes to teaching facilitating product management courses, mentoring people, and also contributing my wealth of experience to working in that particular economy, and also my plans of also starting a business at some point after I'm well settled and integrated. So I was able to clearly state that. I also went as far as clearly stating where I was going to be staying, right, and all those types of things. So again, just putting all of the facts forward in a very structured way. Like I said, I used the star writing approach, which worked for me, right? I also focused on bringing to the fore my value and my expertise, and now it was going to benefit the economy. So doing all of that was what just made my personal statements really, really great.
All great advice. And I also wanted to encourage audience watching this live that if you have questions to Deji or to me, you can ask them basically live, and we'll be happy to answer them. We did have one question, so I wanted to get through it now, and then we'll take more questions. And I wanted to ask some closing thoughts, some tips and tricks and lessons that you learned during the process towards the end. So we had one question: is it okay to use reference letters as the only evidence for a particular section if there are strong references and from C-level executives? So Deji, maybe you can share your thoughts whether you did this for any of your criteria, basically.
I used three very strong reference letters. I used the reference letter showing the growth of a product-led digital technology economy. I used a reference letter showing the growth of a non-profit organization or social enterprise. And I also used, I think, a reference letter from my employer showing proof of significant contribution to the growth of a product-led organization. The question is not clear enough, but I think the answer to it is yes. If you have strong reference letters, you can also use them as part of the evidences for a particular section, which was what I did, showing proof of significant contributions to product-led organizations. So I think the answer to that is yes. But the reference letters have to be very strong and well written, and it has to show the value we're able to bring to those organizations. In fact, it almost has to be structured in such a way that without your impact, the organization would not have achieved what they achieved. That's the best way structure. That's how it has to be shown, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think that the way I understand this question is whether somebody can use just letters to prove a criteria, and the answer to that is no. Reference letters on itself are not enough. So if you are choosing a particular criteria, you should have a strong reference letter. That's awesome, but also should have something else. And this is clearly stated in the guide. But also I've seen rejections where people didn't follow this and they got rejected. So try to come up with something else. As Deji said, if you worked on something, you will have proof of doing this. So just you can use this as a tip. So there was another question: how many years of experience do you think is sufficient to be able to get the global talent visa? So I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Deji, on this.
I think in the criterias, right, or the requirements for both, I think it's kind of listed there. For the global promise, I think it's somewhere around 4 or 5 years experience or below. I don't know, I'm sure Nadia knows. For global talent, it's anything above that. So if you have maybe 6 years experience above, you kind of have to go for the global talent option. But if it's, I think, 5 years below, you'd have to go for the global promise option. Nadia, am I correct?
Yeah. So basically, if you're earlier in your career, fewer than 5 years, people go for the promise. If more than 5, then for talent, it's not that strict. You can also get talent if you have fewer than 5, but you have a lot of achievements. So it depends. The guide, I think, is pretty clear on that, but also kind of the decision depends on the officer. Cool. Any kind of tips or lessons that you learned during this process that you'd like to share with the audience as we start to wrap up?
Number one is there has to be some sort of strong why, right, as to why you're doing this. If you're just doing this just because every other person is doing it, and then you also just want to be part of the bandwagon, then I don't know, you might really not put in the required passion to be able to get it through. But there has to be something tied to it. Like for me, my why was I wanted to move from building products locally to building digital products globally, right? And that desire was what drove me. to be able to see this through to the very end. So I think the first thing is there has to be a strong why, first of all. Secondly is to get as much help as you can, but ensure you get the right help, right? I mean, thankfully, we have someone like Nadia on this call, so you can reach out to her if you need help. She has a lot of experience. So I was able to get help, and that was able to give me some insight as to how Global Talent expects you to kind of put in your application. So that'll be very helpful. Number three is when gathering your evidences, take your time and do it the right way. You understand? I mean, I found myself going into emails that I had sent since like 2015, 2014, 2013, that kind of thing, and just gathering the evidences. I mean, I personally think this is the most kind of stressful part because you kind of have to think through what you've done. And I mean, well, luckily for me, I kind of had a lot of these impacts documented, right? So I was able to pull it out. Right, but for someone who does not have it documented, it might be a bit of a struggle. So my advice is, I mean, it's not too late to begin to document your impacts. You can begin to do that, but also getting those timestamps basically, and then gathering together for evidence can be a bit tedious, to be very honest. But that was why I said you need to have a strong why, because if you have a strong why, it keeps pushing you no matter what. And then lastly, I think just do it. Just do it. I mean, there is no point procrastinating. A failure is when you don't try, when you don't even get up, you don't try. But when you get up and then you fall, that's not a failure, right? It's just a great experience that you've picked. You stand up and you keep on trying. But then it becomes worse when you don't even try because of so many excuses. Oh, it's stressful. I don't have the time. I'm not sure I'll get it. What am I going to do when I get into the UK? How am I going to settle into the UK? You really can't know all of that except you try. So my encouragement to anybody today who thinks, oh, I might have a chance at this opportunity is that there is only one way you can find out. Just take that step and try.
Amazing. I fully agree. I'm all for trying and seeing what happens. And then you never know what will happen, right? Without trying and seeing whether you can get the visa, whether you like UK or not. I think that doing research is fine, but also there is only so much that you can research about a country to see whether it's the country for you. I think that moving somewhere is kind of the best way to learn whether this is a place for you or not. So I do agree with the sentiment. And also there were some questions kind of today that were about the fundamentals of the visa. And I do encourage people who have some questions about how the visa works and the fundamentals of getting it to go to my YouTube channel. It's at BeetleHope, and I have a 9-part tutorial where I explain the whole thing in detail, like all the criteria, all the documents. You can watch it and you can find out like basic things about the visa if you are still just starting your research. And also on this channel there is a lot of information about a lot of interviews like the one that is happening right now with people from various occupations. So I've interviewed, I think, not every possible profession, but quite a lot of professions. Also, you can let me know in the comments, is there a specific profession that you would like to see me interview? Maybe there is somebody that I've never spoken to and I would love to kind of cover all the fields that are possible. So this was an excellent chat. Thank you so much, Deji, for sharing your experience, for spending the time with us, sharing all your knowledge and your experience. I'm sure this was helpful for people. And if you have further questions, you can continue asking in the comments. I will make sure to answer them as well. Thank you so much, Deji.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nadia. Pleasure is mine. Have a nice day.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for watching. If you enjoyed this, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You know the drill. I will really appreciate it. And this will show me that this content is needed, and I will continue doing it. So thank you so much, everybody, and have a nice evening. Bye.
Yeah, bye.